Okay, hello everyone. Good morning. We're going to run a little bit, 10 minutes from the original start because we were waiting for you to come. Thank you so much. So, very warm welcome to the first session on Methods and Construction Track, where we will be talking about harmonizing policies to achieve whole life carbon and resilient building goal. As you saw, very coherent with what we saw just in the plenary. My name is Cristina Gamboa. I'm the CEO of the World Green Building Council. And in this session, each speaker is going to be introducing themselves, herself as we go, for agility. So I do believe this is such an important and timely conversation because reaching our global climate and resiliency goals is dependent on all of us working to deliver decarbonization and resiliency solutions at scale. So we heard some ideas in order how to do this, but actually one of the key conversations is how are we on the same page when it comes to alignment? Progress has been made, no doubt, and we'll see it's small, it's not at the pace we need, but we are roughly on track, not at scale, to be decarbonizing this sector by 2050. And we did hear a strong call around resiliency in housing and being empathic also with informal settlements and the diversity of the solutions that are needed worldwide. So when it comes to alignment, there are indeed around the world many standards, assessment frameworks, certification and building codes, which consider the whole life carbon and resiliency impacts of buildings. These are vital tools, no doubt at all, because they accelerate the rate and direction of progress within our sector, making new and existing buildings low carbon and resilient. However, we do know that we need that harmonization across standards and codes so we can send a clear signal to the market, a clear message, monitoring progress and making sure that the deployment is effective, it's their use and the right purpose, from finance to investments, and of course, guidance for policymakers to continue to improve the performance of the built environment and make sure that deepens the curve towards decarbonization. So the current status of the lack of language commonality, the risk is confusion, and that investors are possibly looking at the wrong direction on what to do, where to put their resource. And we are, in the current path, locking in possibly emissions from poor choices and lack of action. So at World GBC, we are calling for alignment and standardization of standards to scale climate action and unlock investments at global scale. We must use this convening of the sector collectively with you. It's not only, it's all of us. And we need together to dispel the myths and ensure the community is aligned on what's needed before further solutions, more and more things are put out there. It does feel sometimes in this conference that there's new things announced, a new initiative that has not been even trialed and tested. Let's just pause a second. Do we need that? Can we just agree that maybe we do have things that we just need to clarify and collaborate to bring at scale? So the other part of the honesty that I think we need to in the conversation is that I don't believe, and I think it's not me, I'm speaking on behalf of the network that I represent. There seems not to be, I'm not going to be that absolute because I'm inviting a collaborative conversation, and of course you may have your opinions, but they may not be. A single global definition, quote unquote, of net zero is. I don't think there is a realistic one solution fits all, because it overlooks local context, it overlooks cultural richness and diversity, it overlooks diversity of climates, it overlooks the diversity of the needs of the population. It is an industry that is immobile. It's a local asset. It is not an asset that moves. It has to be appropriate to what people needed, what the climate needs, what the methods and construction are, etc. So, but in that diversity, what we need to do in the homework is to harmonize reporting standards so that we're not comparing apple with pears, because the moment of the industry, the moment of reckoning is that we need to be comparing assets to asset, even though they're in different places. So, because we need to make sure they're on a performance pathway. So to support this, we will develop a global framework based on key principles of a net zero building, and I hope today we can surface such solutions to this conversation. The framework of course, must uphold transparency of information and data. Transparency amongst complexity, yeah? And so there's a lot of silver linings in this direction. We need to be on the same page. We should consider, of course, regional relevancy to identify the best set of measures to decarbonize a building in a holistic way and ensure accountability of the measures. For example, through having them being third-party verified. So we need to open our books and we need to be confident that we are walking the talk. So this does not mean that we cannot go beyond alignment around key principles. Actually, we can have a subset of actors agreeing on a definition of net zero. For example, in Europe, our green building councils are leading work on having a net zero buildings definition because actually the implementation of the energy performance directive, buildings directive, needs it. So when you need it, you do it, right? And we bring that transparency. So we do believe we can achieve this alignment of vision, and their approach here in this session is going to be very valuable because we do need diverse stakeholders to be in the journey with us. And for that alignment, it is around policymakers, we heard it in the session, having guidelines and tools that helps them set ambitious and implementable policies. For sure, we need an enabling policy environment. And that has to be based on sound and aligned standards with access to best practice examples. Investors, they have to be able to rely on rating tools to guide investments in lines with the ESG reporting frameworks that are so mature around our sector and confidently choose the ESG goals that they wish to pursue, minimizing physical and transition risks while also having access to the information to collate investment portfolio performance and thus unlock investments at wider scale. And industry players, we will, at the end of the day, they won't need to worry because they actually will have the information they need to make better choices, and the key principles will be there, and there will be confidence that the investments are going into best quality assets that, of course, are an amazing, amazing portfolio because it is future-proofed. It will be the assets that are not going to be stranded assets in the future. So we have a huge challenge ahead of us. I'm not saying what I'm saying is easy, but we are equally up to it. And more immediately, today's forum is an invaluable space to provide and explore how can we go from the past and accelerate meaningful collaboration. So I do very much looking forward with you, with all of you, all of us that are going to be speaking today. I think it's the beginning of deeper collaboration again, another pledge. But I think we're a little bit like up to here of talk meetings, and we want to get rolled up in the sleeves and do this together. So I look forward now to handing it over to Judy Zakreski. She's a Senior Vice President in Global Operations Solutions at the International Code Council, who is going to highlight the key components of the regulatory ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for those great remarks. As always, I always enjoy hearing your thoughts. And thanks to everyone here for joining us today, and a special thank you to the hardworking folks that worked very hard to organize this panel. It's been a bit of a sprint marathon, so we're really happy to be here today. I want to set the stage for this session by introducing a holistic approach to building regulation. So decarbonization, net zero, also resilience require an eye on implementation. If you have strong standards, if you have harmonized standards, they don't matter if they can't be enforced, if they can't be implemented in each country that is using them. So in the work that we do, we work throughout the world at the International Code Council, seeing different levels of implementation in different jurisdictions around the world. And often policymakers and regulators will approach building regulation with almost an exclusive focus on developing or selecting a building code or standards that will be adopted for use in that jurisdiction, without really considering how they will be implemented. So more appropriately, the consideration for the building regulations that will be adopted in the jurisdiction should expand. The thought process should expand to incorporate the capacity for enforcement, the availability of construction materials to meet the adopted standards, the testing of the materials, and the competency of the practitioners, which all leads to the need to address training and licensing for individuals and labeling of buildings and materials. So this holistic approach is really critical because unless the enforcement capacity exists, again, even the best building codes and standards will not result in safer, more sustainable, and resilient buildings. And it's actually surprising how often we see that even in the global north, many countries lack the capacity to effectively enforce their codes and standards. And that's, of course, why we see building failures. But it's really impossible to know how many buildings designs are approved by a jurisdiction based, but it's impossible to, or it's difficult to see or understand just how many jurisdictions are approving plans for buildings based on the trust of the designer or the engineering firm rather than having an ecosystem in place. So many of the speakers that you'll be hearing today are going to be discussing building codes and standards, the regulations that inform how buildings should be designed and built, either using a performance approach or through reference to prescriptive standards. There are also organizations here today that have specialized in training and credentialing programs, as well as certification programs for buildings and construction products. All of these are great tools, and there's great value in working together and working with something, as Christina says, that already exists rather than reinventing the wheel. It achieves harmonization and avoids duplication of work. A holistic approach is necessary here as well, particularly to ensure that the standards that are adopted are fit for purpose, also as Christina said, and that they're enforceable in that way. And that maybe means they need to be implemented on a step-by-step basis, or maybe they need to be adjusted to account for the local availability of materials or the commonly employed construction practices. Finally, I'd like to note that while all of these elements displayed on this graph are very important and should be a serious part of the consideration of any jurisdiction looking to adopt a new code or standard, the jurisdiction does not have to take on all of these responsibilities internally. Third-party providers exist in many jurisdictions, and some of the functions can be outsourced, most commonly training and credentialing of professionals, specialized inspections, product testing and certification, and accreditation services. Of course, the authority having jurisdiction should ensure that the outside service provider is competent and that they're regularly audited by the jurisdiction. So while we'll be hearing about the newest developments in codes and standards for whole life carbon, sustainability, and resilience, and that harmonization is helpful and should be encouraged as much as possible, the ability to enforce a regulation is absolutely essential. Therefore, capacity building and right-sizing regulations should always be top of mind for a jurisdiction adopting a new code or standard. I'd like to now turn it over to Ryan Kolker, the Vice President of Innovation for the International Code Council, and the speakers of the first panel to come to the stage to present a session about identifying resources, strategies, and principles for codes, standards, and assessments, deployment, and development.
Good morning. As Judy said, I'm Ryan Kolker, Vice President of Innovation at the International Code Council. Pleased to be here to moderate today's panel. As we've already heard, harmonization is essential, but we really need to understand what currently exists and how they align. We'll hear from panelists who represent a diversity of approaches, but hopefully leading to a holistic strategy that marries multiple levers. First, we'll hear from Marjolaine Maynard-Millefert, who is a member of the French Assembly. Sorry, I don't speak French. Hopefully that was close. Member of the French National Assembly and president of Alliance HQE, the French Green Building Council. She will share the French approach to whole life carbon policies.
I'll start the timer so that I can respect my 5 minutes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests. As you probably know, with the 2020 French environmental regulation, we now have one of the most advanced regulations regarding energy and carbon. Although I'm a politician, and I would like nothing more than to take all the credit for myself, I have to make a confession. The truth is, this regulation was only possible thanks to proactive and voluntary collective sustainable innovation from the whole building stakeholders, coordinated in synergy by the French government and by the associations like the French Green Building Council. And it fed on constant international observation and partnership. It was a collective effort, and it took years. I will not do any teasing. The main ingredients of the recipe we had were data, transparency, sharing, efforts, tests, sharing again. It took years. But this morning, I do not have years. I've Audrey said several times, I only have minutes. So let me sum up the recipe for you. First, a few pioneers decided to evaluate materials and equipments according to a whole bunch of environmental and health criteria and put all this data into a database called IGNES. Without this data, life cycle assessment is not possible. Without the industry sharing demanding data within the database, there would be no RE 2020. In 2011, the HQE-GBC Alliance carried out a real-life assessment through the life cycle assessment of 74 buildings, representing 800 homes and 300,000 square meters of tertiary surfaces. This world-first initiative validated the calculation method. We worked with international peers to support data availability and reliability, to support compatibility and whole-life carbon mindset adoption. In 2016, the French government launched the Positive Energy and Carbon Reduction Building label, or E+, C- label. This label was integrated into HQE certifications, NF Energy and BBCA labels. This helped popularize the LCA method on a broader scale. These labels were not mandatory. They were required by cities, regions, private actors who wanted to show they were doing better than average, who invested in sustainable performance, who made environmental ambition into a business or a political narrative. They were pioneers. When enough projects were created all over France by a large variety of stakeholders, it was possible to go all in. In 2022, the RE 2020 was adopted. That's right, that's 2 years behind schedule, but who's counting? All new residential buildings, followed by offices and educational buildings, are now subject to RE 2020 that tackles with energy, carbon, and summer comforts. The buildings must undergo a life cycle assessment. Obviously, we are still getting used in France to the revolution that is the RE 2020. Some are grumbling, but there are no major hiccups. Things are doing rather well. So we are already thinking about the next steps. The next steps, you ask? While the latest regulation is barely out of the legislative oven. Yes, because we have high sustainable ambitions. We are setting our sights onto 2030 now, with 9 new or increased targets: carbon neutrality, performance measurement, energy and collaboration with networks, indoor environmental quality, sustainable water management, circular economy, biodiversity, climate change adaptation, low-tech. And we are applying the same method, experimenting and innovating with various labels, sharing information to harmonize what we experienced, increasing the number of projects everywhere so that an ever wider group of actors get familiar with the methodology. And when everyone feels like it's practical to generalize, we will enforce the next regulation. And at the same time, we are already working on low-carbon climate-adapted renovations, of course. Is it too fast? Some say so. But we are all depending on civil society demand. When people face climate catastrophes, they demand actions. Water shortages in France during summer heat waves have made water a pressing matter, for example. So we know we need to take actions now and take action for the future. So of course, we need to plan ahead. Climate pressure is unavoidable. People will demand answers. We need to be ready with well-thought-out, resilient solutions, and we need to prevent today's and tomorrow's risks. With the RE 2020, we knew we had left out a bunch of important topics that we would need to tackle fairly quickly. So the French government asked the main associations carrying labels to think up the next regulations. Can you maybe merge into one and only label and create the ultimate label to rule all labels, they asked? And we said, maybe not. We actively suggested differently. We created the Ecological Interest Group, GIE en français. formed by the HQGBC Alliance, the Collective for Sustainable Neighborhood and Building Approaches, and the Affinity Collective, with the technical and scientific support of the CSTB and the Minister of Ecology. The fact that there are still different labels with different approaches, our diversity, in short, is what allows us to innovate. But we have to go in the same direction. The fact that we get together with the GIE on what can be generalized is what allows us to shorten the time between regulations without creating normative stress and chaos. In France, CAP 2030, which basically translates as towards Common Goal 2030, thus benefits from a unique organization that will allow for the co-construction of a progressive, evolving, and adaptable common framework considering territorial specificities based on a holistic approach. That's also a mouthful, like my name. It is a tremendous opportunity for the entire industry to collectively build the future of construction, relying on committed stakeholders and existing initiatives. It's also public-private effort. It is politically efficient as well. Why? Why is it politically efficient? Because the city can still use whichever label they want. Choosing the narrative, innovation, highlight that is best suited to its political agenda, to its region, to its people needs, and it still contributes to a common framework that will nourish the global learning curve. The challenge is not the same everywhere. Territories have different sizes, challenges, specificities, and pace, and therefore require tailored approaches. There is not one solution fits all. The importance is the performance the important is the performance. Rural areas, urban territories all need to be embarked. But there are other places in the world that know exactly what these not so unique, after all, territories are facing. For example, in my constituency, people knew how to build from earth. That's something that you mainly forgot in France. Paris has no idea how to build from earth. But in Senegal, for example, well, there are people doing that every day. So here are a partnership made in heaven for us. So that's my conclusion. Labels and regulations are tremendously useful to help change scale on environmental and innovation. But too much standardization is fuel for frustration as well. Each territory has its own recipe of sorts on how to achieve 2050 goals. So we are building up on different cultures, different organization of the work chain. So of course, here and there, we won't implement exactly in the same way, exactly like Christina said, just like our labels. We will all be pioneers and innovative on different things. The idea isn't to standardize innovation and reduce that to a single recipe, same dish for all. That would be rather sad, especially in France. It's rather to pick throughout our world culinary creativity and the most appropriate ingredients to create a healthy diet and menu, enjoyable menu. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a great start to the discussion. We're now going to hear from three panelists who are going to share sort of their slice of the puzzle and really seeing how all of the pieces can really fit together. So we're pleased to have Amit Patel from RICS, or RICS, Nasser Khan from the Pakistan Engineering Council, and Stanislas Potier from BBCA to share their activities. So I have one question for each of you. What are your current approaches to addressing greenhouse gases and resilience, and what gaps are you currently addressing and still see that need to be addressed? Amit, I'll start with you.
I'm going to start off with carbon literacy. I think there's a big growth area where we think that, we've got this contained environment here as we are, and we're educated to a certain degree. But outside of this remit of real estate, there's a lack of literacy around carbon. We need to upskill, we need to train, we need to get people with us and to educate what we're doing. I think that the gaps are in there in terms of capacity building, in terms of where we're located, in terms of regionally, the regional education system. We really need to start at the grassroots of where we can identify what these notions are around the gaps about this literacy around this carbon language. I think we need to get over this. We need to come and say together, we've got a common framework, we've got a common kind of work and knowledge around it, and move forward, I think.
Great, thank you. Before we move on, we do have a Slido. We can give you the QR code. You can actually enter questions in the Slido as well. Hopefully we'll have some time to do that. And then once we get through the panelists, we'll ask you a couple questions as well. So, Engineer Khan, if you'd like to start.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Nasir Khan from Pakistan Engineering Council. Recently, we developed a green building code and rainwater harvesting code with the really close partnership of International Code Council. And we have developed standards, regulations, and sent to the government, federal government, for legislation process. And meanwhile, we have been working towards the enforcement so that we can have reduce carbon emissions, and also we can enforce these codes for the ultimate outcomes of this all initiatives. I'm going to share a little bit what we have done so far regarding renewable energy as part of this drive. PC have introduced and implemented first on-grid net metering power generation system in Pakistan and incentivize the general house public. And so far, at the outcome, we have more than 70,000 households and buildings shifted towards this green energy, power generation in Pakistan, and producing about 8 megawatt electricity by their own incentive. So this is one of the drive that we have done so far with the help of governments and with the help of provincial governments as well. And regarding rainwater harvesting codes, we developed and implementing now by the developing agencies in the federal government as well as in the provincial governments. And now they are in the process of approval with the different, provincial governments as being the, localized subject. We wanted to have this co-development at rural and as well urban flooding so that we can control the water conservation at the rurals, and we can shift this water towards the drought areas, and also at the same time we can control urban flooding, and while implementing this, giving it permission to how building should be having with the design of water harvesting codes. So we are in the process of implementing slowly. And another initiative the federal government has done, and we are the partner, is a green growth initiatives. It's 10 billion tree plantation across the country. And it's going very well, and it's very popularized. And why we are involved, we have involved the university, the students, the colleges, the public, and all the departments. So it's going everywhere, converting, restoring the forest and protected areas back into the green, areas. And this is going very popular. It's going on process because the target set is 10 billion tree plantation, which is a long term, and we are going with all the wildlife, improve ecology and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and forest conservations. Another thing is sustainable greenhouse urban planning. We are trying to shift to skyscrapers building rather than expansion horizontal buildings, so that we can restore the food security, more fertile land into the agriculture system, rather than having more housing schemes coming in, and cities are like combining each other, and there is no land properly available for this biodiversity. We developed green building code, and it's already a implementation phase. We are looking forward different financial institutions to support in this regard, because it required capacity building of all the stakeholders, engineers, municipal committees, and district level governments, so they can adopt these codes in their policies and they can start implementing. At the federal level, yes, it is done already. The government has approved that already in their legislation, but because the housing sector is devolved in the district level and provincial level government, so now we are going to create awareness, capacity building, and we are working with IFC, World Bank, so that we can speed up this implementation enforcement, and also training of the engineers and the policymakers on how to implement these goals, how to get the real benefit of this. Similarly, we are developing a engineers parliamentarian caucus, which the parliament has approved the PEC initiatives for the advocacy at the public level and the support from the parliament to the government to PEC codes implementation at the government level. So these are the big initiatives that we are doing.
Great. Fantastic. I see some of you have already answered the first poll, which is great. So we can move on to the next one. But I'm going to turn over to Stanislas to speak about your effort.
Yeah, thanks, and good morning to everyone. Well, I'm chairing BBCA, Low Carbon Building Association, and it was created in 2015, ahead of COP21, by stakeholders particularly committed in the building area to climate change and decarbonization. And the idea was to build knowledge about how to measure carbon and how to decarbonize. How can I do that? So we have now referentials and labels on new buildings, on the exploitation, buildings in use, reshuffling of buildings, and life end. So we have a full-fledged carbon accountancy proposal for buildings on the entire life cycle. And the originality also of the association is that we're very pragmatic. So everything was built on a bottom-up way with stakeholders, so that we can verify that everything, every means of decarbonization is really feasible. So we both want to be at the forefront of decarbonization, very innovative and very demanding, but at the same time feasible. And we set different performance thresholds that enable certificators and third-party actors to deliver labels. So now, since we have all this carbon accountancy, we're also able to give a way to asset owners and asset managers to monitor decarbonization and carbon footprint on an entire portfolio, which was absolutely key. And that was not possible with only, for instance, new buildings. So, but we can also treat with existing building. And our new frontier, I would say now we're dealing with, is extension in Europe with the Low Carbon Building Initiative, so that asset owners, asset managers, bankers, real estate companies, construction companies can compare carbon footprint and also monitor decarbonization on different assets all over Europe. Well, all over. We start with 8 countries, but 8 big markets: Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and the UK. We kept the UK. And we will deliver first examples of these LCBI labels, which will be delivered by Veritas, so totally transparent and third-party verified, at our fair on low-carbon buildings and cities early October this year. So I invite all of you to come and join us this fall to share all these new initiatives and how front runners in the decarbonization in buildings are really leading the path.
Great, thank you. You can move on to the next Slido poll. Very interesting answers, but picking up on sort of the conversation, I think each of you mentioned sort of 2 key points. One was around the importance of capacity building and ensuring that the folks that would be using your various different strategies were actually prepared to use them effectively. And then the second piece is around sort of partnerships and engaging stakeholders through that process. As we're talking about harmonization, I think both of those pieces are essential. So maybe let's start with sort of the first piece. Which stakeholders did you involve, and how did you bring them, to the table to work through the development, of these various different tools and systems? Amit,
Yeah, I can take this one. So let's look at the whole life carbon assessment that the RICS released last year. This was an industry-wide, so we make sure that we collaborated with every single professional body within the UK. These were industry leaders, making sure that we captured all their thoughts and all their kind of visions about what this looks like. We collaborated with them not only from a technical level, but also engaging our members as well. So make sure that it was a whole piece from end to end, using technical kind of knowledge from them to make sure that we wrapped around the whole life carbon assessment all the way from kind of cradle to grave kind of element. We made sure that people were along this journey. So you have to kind of buy in. You have to kind of buy in from the professional bodies. You have to kind of buy in from industry. And then what we did, we kind of created this whole kind of plethora of kind of information flow. So all the way from really from the early inception phase, from the feasibility stage, all the way to the kind of design and construction phase and end of life. We want to make sure we're capturing data. Data is kind of the most important thing that we're doing here at the moment. And like Christine said, we need transparency and we need collaboration. We kind of work together with industry bodies to create the kind of BECD. Now the BECD model is a kind of repository for information. It's an open source information piece that we kind of worked together with industry to make sure it's open source, people can access it, people can look at it, people can review it, people can reposit information. Not just from the UK, but we're working collaboratively across the world to say, like, give us your data and let's transform this into a piece where we can work with you guys in terms of using that data, collaborate with you, and then having that data to kind of make sure that the financial investments are backed up with actual live data. I want to talk about what we can do, how we can model this going forward. We can replicate this. You know, we know that there's nuances within the countries. We know that things won't work. We've got to stop. We've got to kind of draw a line in the sand for standards. We've got the standards. We've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds, millions of pounds developing standards. We need to start using this. We need to start testing it. We need to see what works, what doesn't work. We've got regional differences, we've got cultural differences, and we've got methods of how we construct. They're all different. We are not one singular kind of culture whereby, you know, bricks and mortar are the kind of asset value. What we need to do is use those principles that we have, we use them existingly, see what works in different countries, talk to people, collaborate with people, and find out actually, you know, the common methodologies around about measurement, around about transparency, collaboration, using what we've got in terms of benchmarking data. There is so much data out there, but we're just not cleansed. Everyone uses their data. It stays on your laptop. It stays on your central computer, and everyone forgets about it. Let's kind of like uplift that, take it out of your desktop, take it out of your offices, give it to a kind of central repository system, and let's use it. Because if we can't use it in the developing world, how can we help people who are in the emerging markets? We need to use that data so we can compare and contrast. We don't have a baseline, so we need to create a baseline in terms of where we are now to where we're going to get to. So then we can draw a line in the sand and say, actually, these are the restrictions, or these are the kind of redundancies that we have in the model. These are the redundancies in the model, and let's help each other. I truly believe that kind of working together as countries, as states, and as institutes, we can work on this. You know, it's all, the tool sets are there. We've just got to go out and grab it and do it.
Great, thank you. If we could move to the next slide, the next Slido question. As part of sort of our effort to harmonize, we really need to understand sort of where are the gaps, where are the challenges, and so if folks could answer, that would be great, and we'll sort of bring that back. We just have a couple minutes left, but Stanislas, do you want to sort of talk about stakeholders and engagement?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Maybe I would stress three things. First, we wanted to remain totally independent from construction methods. So we do not have, as members of the association, building materials producers, companies. We only have real estate companies, building companies, engineering companies, architects, of course. So I think that's important, even though we know that some materials are much less carbonized than others. Second thing is that we really must work with people on the ground. So building companies and real estate companies to check that things we thought would be possible to decarbonize, or the way to measure one material or one way of building is really working, and we can get the data and we can monitor it, and it's up to the to innovation. And third, we absolutely must collaborate with regulatory authorities, with executive political authorities. This is very important, because if you want things to really be executed, implemented, if you want to progress not on claims, but on real decarbonization, we must align views and strategies. So, and I think that was even though it was long and a difficult process, I think that it was very fruitful, all the discussions we have and exchanges with the authorities in the making of the new regulation, RE 2020, which now puts France at the forefront of life cycle and carbon regulation. So that way of collaboration between private sector, public sector authorities, in my opinion, is absolutely key.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Khan, we have like 1 minute, so.
Very quickly, yeah. Thank you very much, because we are being the regulator, and by composition of Pakistan Engineering Council, we have academia with us, a very strong private industry with us, the construction industries, and the consultants, because we used to regulate consultant agencies, and as well as the representation from all the government, provincial governments and the federal government. So the stakeholders, what we are going with the top-down approach, we have involved the parliamentarian caucus in the upper house, the lower house, and all the governments, so that we can have policy and advocacy to enforce these codes what we have developed with the partnership of international organizations like ICC and other World Bank and the ADB. And we are involving universities in their curriculum to demonstrate, so that universities, students, and their teaching learning process can demonstrate these codes, and they can learn and implement when they are in the practice. And similarly, when involving the challenges major in Pakistan is the limitations of not only the understanding capacity building of retrofitting the buildings, as well as to execute the new buildings, is the financial limitations. So we are trying to involve local as well as the international partner with us to help to enforce expeditiously, and we set goals under the WA. 2025, the next year, is to demonstrate by all the academics, universities, and developing agencies who are implementing these building codes permissions. And in the next coming 5 years, we're trying to be more capacity building for enforcement to the level of municipal committee and district level. So we are involving all kind of stakeholders and give them a capacity building and also a roadmap, concrete roadmap with the KPIs to monitor and evaluate what they have done in a year's time.
Great. Well, I want to thank our panelists. I know many of them will be around, so I'm happy to pick up the conversation. But I'm pleased to turn the mic over to Stephen Richardson from the World Green Building Council for the next panel.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. I'm pleased to take on the mantle and try and advance the conversation. I've been looking at the questions that are coming through, and I think it's fascinating to see this is a really contested space. We've been hearing a really clear message from the front that there needs to be more harmonization, but we have to recognize national context. We have to recognize that not every jurisdiction can do things in exactly the same way, but we're seeing some questions and comments coming through that actually, no, we need more harmonization. We need a single standard. We need common definitions. And I think this is a really important debate, and I'm really looking forward to what our panel are going to bring to that. Before we bring the panelists up to the stage, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Masaya Sasaki from the government of Japan, is going to set the scene a little bit by telling us about what the government of Japan has been doing to enforce standards on operational carbon and also to test standards on whole life carbon. Mr. Sasaki, please.
Thank you very much today. I'm Masaya Sasaki, Director for Building and Environment of the Japanese government. Today, I'd like to share Japan's experience on introducing the mandatory standard and whole life carbon approach. First, this is Japan's goal on building sector. Our primary goal is to achieve the level of net zero for buildings on stock basis by 2050. In line with this, we aim for all new buildings at net zero level by 2030. So, to do this, this is our challenge and solution. Unfortunately, public awareness on climate change adaptation in Japan is relatively very low. So we have been struggling to install the regulatory measures. So our major challenges were to minimize negative impact on economy and not to cause any confusion in the market. So our solution to those challenges is to adopt the step-by-step approach and capacity building program. Specifically, we've been striving to build enabling environment to achieve the net zero level through the capacity building programs. Then, with such effort, we have gradually introduced the regulation to specific size and types of buildings, which achieves a certain level of performance. Sorry. Here is our step-by-step approach. Please see green line. We firstly introduced the mandatory standard in 2017 to large-scale non-residential buildings. And it will be upgraded in 2020 for this year and in 2030. And then next is mid-scale non-residential buildings. The introduction was in 2021, and the upgrade will be in 2026 and 2030. Then the remaining buildings, including residential buildings, will be under the standard in next year and will be strengthened in 2030. And the next is our capacity building program. This is our program consists of 4 things: financial support, information sessions, and support tools and publications. Information sessions and financial support provide opportunity to learn about the regulation and how to calculate, evaluate the performance. And for further technical support, we released a guidance to comply with the standard without complicated calculation. And also, the tools that support calculation tools, enabling the simpler evaluation of performance is also available now. And publications such as manga was released to raise awareness on public and stakeholders. So this is our yearly trends of the compliance rate with the standard. Please see the, so through our approaches, the energy efficiency performance have been sufficiently enhanced to the certain level. Please see, for example, please see the navy line. The rate on residential building was only 46% in 2015. But now it's increased to nearly 90%. So that enables us to determine the standards were ready to cover those groups. So, sorry. Okay, so lastly, at the same time, we are trying to incorporate whole life carbon approach into our policies. So we established the public-private partnership platform to develop and discuss the tools and methodologies with participation of all kinds of stakeholders. Our new assessment tools will be released this May. So I think I think it's going very well so far. But there are a lot of things to do. I wrote down my concern under this slide. Yeah, there are a lot to do. So, but we, all of my concern is very difficult to deal with. Yeah, but Japan would like to move forward. So our regulatory measures is almost set. So what we have to do is only move forward and accelerate our measures. So we would like to do with international cooperation, such as building breakthrough or so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sasaki. We appreciate your insights, and it's great to see that not just in France and we're here in Europe. We know that some of the things happening here. It's great to see this action and progress being made in many other parts of the world. And I'm very pleased to welcome our next panel. Again, a diverse group. We have Lars Riemann, who is from the Danish headquartered consultancy Rumble. We have Sarah Zaleski, who's here from the US Green Building Council, and again, apologies for the British pronunciation, Katerina Uharova-Hasbani, I hope I got that vaguely close, who is working for another international consultancy based in Dubai. So we have some good international perspectives, and I'm going to join the panel on the stage. So please do keep posting questions through the Slido. I will try and make some time to take some of those questions. But I wanted to just sort of set the scene a little bit, because we heard in the plenary earlier from Oliver Rapf. I'm sure many of you were in the plenary listening to his presentation. We are nowhere near on track. So we want this event to really be a catalyst for action and not just words. So I'm going to be challenging our speakers a little bit and putting them on the spot to say, what is it that they are doing that will help us go further and faster? And I hope that each of you will take something away from this session and from the whole forum that you can do, specifically, personally, that you can do, that will help drive acceleration. So, Lars, if I may put you on the spot first. You've heard earlier, and both from Japan and France, that actually working collaboratively with the sector is an effective way of helping the sector to get ready for a more ambitious policy. What is Rumble doing to sort of bring people together to help build that collaboration? What initiatives are you involved in?
So what Rumble is doing is, first of all, we design buildings. So we design hundreds, if not thousands, of buildings every year. We have a huge impact on the environment through the buildings we design. Obviously, it's not our buildings, it's our clients' buildings. But we have nevertheless set ourselves a goal to reduce the embodied carbon of the projects we design, of the buildings we design. So what we have done is we've set ourselves some targets, and we are tracking these targets every year to see if we comply or not comply. In order to do that, we have created a database where we collect all the data from the buildings we design. And now we're gonna, based on what we've heard several times today, we're gonna share this data. So that's the database we call Compare. It's at the moment it's having only 138 buildings in there across some European countries, but we have a lot more data, and then we're gonna go through that data and publish it and update the content of the database in the coming years. So this is a screenshot from the database. It's, as I said, it's open for everybody to go in and filter and play with the data, so that we not only we can analyze the data, we can come out with some of the key learnings that we have done, but we can also let people go in and look at the data themselves. If you go back one slide, please. Yes. The other initiative that I would like to mention is a collaboration between Buildings Transparency, which is a US-based organization working globally. It's an initiative we call Open Data for Climate Initiative, funded by Laudes Foundation, ClimateWorks, and the Ramboll Foundation. Ramboll is owned by the Ramboll Foundation, so that's also a philanthropic foundation. What we are doing here is we are creating a database for materials and product level data. First step is 2,500 data sets of LCA data, so that everybody in the world, also the Global South, that don't have their own databases in each country like we have in most European countries, so also the Global South, everybody can actually use this data. It's going to be open and free. So, and again, it's a way to harmonize the approach so that everybody use the same data and the results of the LCAs that we are doing and the carbon assessments can be compared across countries and across typologies and so on. So we feel that these two initiatives represent two very important missing pieces in the overall ecosystem of doing carbon assessments and thereby reducing carbon. Yeah, you can flick through the slides if please. Yeah, here's another slide or screenshot from our database showing the timeline and projects and so on. And then there's one more that shows the heat map. At the moment it's limited, but this heat map is showing upfront carbon, where is the carbon, and it shows that in the structure, that's dark blue color, and structure has the majority of the carbon, of the upfront carbon when we build buildings.
Thank you, Lars. Great to hear that transparency being acted out. Katharina, if I could come to you, please. We heard again in the plenary that much of the construction that is happening in the Global South especially is not being delivered by big contractors. It's being delivered by small players, none of whom will be in this forum, let's be honest. How can an international business like ASG work with local players? How do you engage with the local market to support them?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Sitting in this room is a bit different than sitting in Dubai, Riyadh, Neom, or Jeddah, where I was over the past 6 weeks. We do that by engaging at several levels. We work with our clients to design their sustainability and decarbonization strategies. Quite surprisingly, it does happen for companies that are either government-owned or that are publicly owned and located in UAE and Saudi Arabia. We also work on the engineering side by optimizing for low carbon and sustainability. And the most difficult part is the delivery, right? Working with the subcontractors. There is a lot of capability building needs, but also needs in terms of supply of the right materials, solutions, technology, and so on. And the biggest challenge that we have today is that in the markets such as UAE and KSA, we really have two markets at the same time. It's a two-speed environment. We have some clients that are exceptionally ambitious, creating some visionary projects. They are integrating a lot of the tools that we talk about today, right? Life cycle analysis. They are getting supplies of very innovative products from across the world. But at the same time, we have still the common market that is struggling with compliance, it's struggling with implementation of the basic regulations and codes, right? So catering to both types of the market is important, right? And when we come up with these solutions, whether digital technologies, material technologies, making sure, and I know, for example, World Green Building Council, where we are a MENA partner, is addressing this by looking at some of the solutions for affordable housing, but at the same time, these more like visionary types of projects. So catering to both, I think it's what we try to do, and It will be the challenge for the next decade, really, right? I really love the presentation at the beginning, Marjolaine, because this is a long-term journey, right? So we cannot judge on the results over the past 2 years. We really need to look forward on where we can be by 2030, 2035.
Thank you, Katharina. Sarah, if I could bring you in. So Katharina has just mentioned the work of some of the green building councils in the MENA region. You're obviously representing the US Green Building Council. Much has been done over the last, I guess, couple of decades, but we've seen we're nowhere near where we need to be. So how is USGBC responding to this sobering situation? What is the Green Building Council doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. I don't know about the rest of you, but these events always leave me very inspired and energized, but also very anxious to get back to the office because there's so much work to do. So I just, I think we heard earlier from the plenary that I think 3 building codes around the world are on track to meet zero emission building targets. And so I want to talk a little bit about, I think we have a couple of slides. I don't know if we're able to click through them, but at USGBC, we think a lot about market transformation and what role we can play as one piece of the big ecosystem. That Judy's slide with the cogs, I really appreciate. It's great to be up here with industry leaders. And so as players in this space, one of the areas that we are proud of and that we're continuing to push is around standards. And I want to talk a little bit about just standards generally. And I really appreciate, Marjolaine, your beautiful story about France and talking about voluntary standards and how that really developed capacity, improved the knowledge base, the literacy, created markets, created supply chains, prime supply chains, created awareness of what's possible and what we can demand and expect and the benefits that can be brought about with green buildings and decarbonization, and really demonstrate what was possible. And so I think standards and certifications can be a really powerful tool for that. So, there's many different standards represented in this room. LEED is one of them. That's represented in over 110 projects in 180 countries. And so really hoping that can be a way that can show and build some of these markets. And we need codes as well, but I think that it's a big solution set from actors and also solutions. So I'll talk just for a minute about LEED because we've been very busy under the development of our new LEED V-Point version 5, and really thinking through these 3 critical lenses of decarbonization, of ecological stewardship and restoration, and of quality of life. And I know we're speaking much about decarbonization for good reason this week, but really understanding the importance of of the quality of life piece and the ecological stewardship piece. And so with LEED V5, roughly half of the content and credits is directly related to decarbonization. And I think one example, how I hope is going to pave some of the way for further action is all of our projects for existing buildings will receive a decarbonization pathway as part of that for what that trajectory of those buildings look like for 2050. And that's information that most buildings do not have currently today and are not planning to. And so really hoping to increase the carbon literacy. And I thought that was a really important point because outside of this room, there's not a lot of carbon literacy about what it's going to take and the actual work and journey that we can put in place, that we need to secure financing and put proactive plans in place in order to meet these really aggressive goals. So just want to, reiterate, I think, the importance of standards and those certifications and some of the incentives that we heard earlier in the plenary are really important to propel the market as we continue to push for codes as well. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sarah. So I've been looking through your questions, and there's many, and we don't unfortunately have time to answer all of them. But I'm going to try and pick out on some of the themes and sort of merge some of the questions together. I see there are a couple of questions, saying why can't we just all adopt a single set of standards? Somebody mentioned the CEN TC350 work, EN 15978, some of these acronyms. There are some international, particularly that one is European standards out there. It feels like there's maybe a mismatch between what global players need, with calling for a single set of standards, and maybe what the national perspectives are. This is a challenging question. It's the really difficult question. But do you see an opportunity for those of us in this room to get further along the alignment journey? And what would you say are the really key next steps that we need to work on? And this will be our final question because we do need to close. So to each of our panel, please.
So I think it is possible to create a global standard for doing carbon assessments. But I think what is necessary is to have the dialogue and the stakeholder involvement on a local level, because we need acceptance. This is a burden to require an LCA for every building is a big burden on a project, a cost burden. And people have to accept it. Developers, the investors, people at the end of the day paying the rent have to accept that this is necessary. And only in order to have that conversation locally and to discuss, okay, how much, how detailed, how comprehensive, and so on, do we want this to be, and is it really going to make a big change or not? Then I think there is, that acceptance needs to be there, and then I think at the end of the day, national standards can come together and harmonize. And so maybe it takes 10 years, I don't know, but I think it's possible.
Thank you, Lars. Sarah?
I do think that these are really healthy discussions, and I'm so glad that we're having them. And I think when you talk about harmonization, there's many different tiers and dimensions that it's important to get it right. So yes, I do think it's an important conversation. I also think that we have enough information to move now much more quickly, even absent perfect harmonization. And I think that's a really important piece when we talk about embodied carbon. Certainly the data infrastructure is, and it's great to hear about efforts like Remble and others are doing to advance that, because that's certainly a big piece of it. But we know enough directional information now on how to reduce embodied carbon in buildings. We know how to improve the energy efficiency. We know how to electrify. We have those technology solutions. And so while we're having these conversations, I think it's really important to not take our focus off of what we do know now and the speed at which we need to implement and adopt some of those technologies.
Thank you, Sarah. And Katharina?
We need both. We need the international standard, but then we also need the local accounting standards. And I like to mention two examples from completely different sectors. One is financial accounting. Despite all of our efforts, there are accounting systems at country level, right? There is not one international accounting system, though we are, many of us are using IFRS, for example, as a reference. And the other example that I like to use is digitalization. 10 years ago, it seemed like something extraordinary to be digitalized company, and today it's something very common. In the similar vein, a life cycle analysis or a life cycle carbon will become a common tool. And by the way, there is a very good example, BEAM. It's a tool that 15 years ago wasn't widespread, and today is a common standard. So we need those 10 years to get there. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. I'm going to close the panel here. I think it's clear there's debate to be had, and World Green Building Council, we're pleased to be able to sort of bring stakeholders like this room together to have that debate in a healthy way. I just want to really sort of emphasize the point that this room is full of the creme de la creme of leaders in the industry. There are, if we are not moving faster, further, then the industry has no chance. So I really hope that you will take away something from this session that is more than just your business as usual. The phrase that I keep coming back to is sustainability as usual is not enough anymore. And to leave us with some final inspiration, I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage Tina Payet, who is the president of the RICS. A round of applause for our panelists, please.
That is, can you hear me? I think, yes, now it's working. Incredible two panels, lots of information. And I think before I start summarizing what I heard and the takeaways, I just want to remind everyone a little bit why we're here. And when Stephen just said we're the creme de la creme in this room, we're probably the most advised, the most conscious of our sector in this room today. And yet, we have such a long path to go, especially to bring in the wider picture. So just to sort of remind us all why we're here, what spurred this particular meeting was Buildings Breakthrough priority actions that were set in COP28 in Dubai. 28. 27 countries that signed COP28 Buildings Breakthrough, which I think just shows it's a huge part of our economy that has signed up to a pledge to make near zero and resilient buildings business as usual by 2030. And within that, there's a priority action that under the standards and harmonization, there's a call for stakeholders to work together to define principles and harmonize frameworks on whole life carbon and resilience. And so I think there is no better place than today in this room with these sessions that we have had a good starting point on putting our best foot forward on those points. And I know it seems that there's a dichotomy somewhere between what we, especially in the first panel, when we heard about harmonization, but we heard about the need for local adaptation, the need to bring this down to the local level. And I think there's a term that's called glocal, which isn't very pretty, but I think is something that we have to strive for. And one of the things that Katerina said at the very end, which absolutely resonates with me and is something that I've been harping on for a while, is that we can have local specificities. We can have local measurement methods, but we need to look at things like the accountancy practices that have the IFRS global framework and methodology, which allows comparable measurement. Because if we want to decarbonize, and we know we're off track, I mean, we heard what was said earlier this morning at the opening plenary session. We're way off track, is what was said. They didn't even dare to say percentages. We're way off track. And so we need to measure to improve, and we need to be able to compare those measurements. So we need to have an overall arching framework that will allow comparison while at the same time allowing for those local specificities. I think it's really important. I'd like to just touch on some of the other themes that came out regularly in both panels. Upskilling, capacity building, not only for our engineers, architects, construction companies, but also for our policymakers and policy teams. This is incredibly important. The upskilling and the understanding and the awareness of carbon and carbon impact and carbon measurement. And I'd like to, hearken back to Japan's step-by-step approach where they were taking to energy efficiency and then planning on moving that into whole life carbon. And also Marjoleine's French example for setting up the E+, C-, if I'm not mistaken, for the RE 2020. It's about iterative action. It's, I think, Marjolaine, you said, we shared, we measured, and then we shared again. This is it. We need to continue trying to get better. We can't wait for the perfect standard that fits all sizes, because as Christina said, there is no one size fits all. We have to bring what we have to the table. This was another theme that came through. Let's just start. Let's, I believe, I'm sorry, I can't remember. Sarah said, I'm anxious to get back to the office. There's so much to do. Yes, we just need to start. We have plenty of tools out there. We need to start, and we need to start measuring and fast, because we have a huge gap to fill. And I think I'd just like to also mention that as I'm up here as president of RICS, that RICS has launched not only a few months back our whole life carbon assessment standard, but we've also launched, specifically in view of launching it here at this forum, a capacity building, a client guide, and most importantly, when we come back to that global idea, how can we use this overall standard to adjust it to local needs? And there is a 7-step or 7 parameters that can be used to actually bridge the gap between a local measurement standard and this overarching standard that RICS is proposing. And I think that I'm going to leave you with the note that it's all about capacity building, about adapting to local situations, and working and sharing, and working and sharing. And it's the transparency of that sharing that is going to be key. And maybe I should also bring in things like what Ramble is working on, very impressive, sharing that data across the board. That's going to be essential. We need to share to improve. We need to share to be able to benchmark and measure. So with those few words, I think I've used up my time, but I want to thank you all for being here. It's been an incredible session with 2 incredible roundtables, and I'd like to give a round of applause for all of those who set it up and who were up here today to cover that area. Thank you so much.